What would you say you do here?
It's the Signal Chords, home of the Underground podcast. A podcast dedicated to up-and-coming bands, labels, artists, and more. Plug in and join your host, Brad Nunnery, as he dives deep into what the future of music has to hold and discover something new along the way. What else do you have to do?
Hey, I'm Nick.
And I'm Matt from Studweiser.
And you're listening to the Signal Chords, home of the Underground podcast.
That song is Killcam Montage by our good friends in Studweiser. Many thanks to Nick and Matt for recording that promo for us. Really do appreciate it, guys. If you love alternative rock with a little hint of emo, you're going to love this band based out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. But if you want to find out more about the band, you can visit them on any social media platform at stud.weiser. What's up, everybody? My name is Brad Nunnery. Welcome to Signal Chords, home of the Underground podcast, Season 3, Episode 4, presented by my really good friend Jeff Small over at 1603 Designs. My guest tonight is Seth Hyman. He's the president and CEO of Negative Progression Records, as well as newly appointed head of A&R, Chris Swinney from Fire Sale. We're going to talk to these guys all about the history of the label, the future of the label, all the bands that are underneath the umbrella, as well as some new music from Fire Sale and their split coming up with legendary punk band Pulley. So we're going to get all the details on that. We're also going to talk about Warped Tour and a whole bunch of other good stuff. But right now, here is the latest from Fire Sale. It's their brand new song. It's called The Ending. It's on Signal Chords, home of the Underground podcast.
What is it you think that we can do when it's constantly abused for so long and all our days?
And Chris, thank you so much for joining the podcast. Really do appreciate it, Chris. We had met before on a previous podcast with your band Fire Sale, but Seth, really great to meet you. You know what? It's so funny because you live probably about 20 minutes away from me, and we have not met yet. So we'll talk about being from Orlando and a lot of good stuff that's going on there. But it's a pleasure meeting you, man. I love following everything that you're doing with Negative Progression, and there's some huge news with Chris taking over A&R. Chris, congratulations, brother. How's it feeling? How's everything going with that?
It's going really good. Like every band I've ever been in, I've done a lot of the business, and
yeah,
as Seth tells me all the time, everyone, and I've kind of used that to my advantage, brokered a couple things for the label, and that went really well. And I think Seth likes me enough that he wanted to work with me in another capacity. So I'm very happy to accept the position, and I can't wait for the future with the label.
Yeah. And Brad, thanks so much for having me on your podcast. Obviously, we've been trying to connect and have a beer sometime in person, but this is a good middle ground, or grab some food. But yeah, it's really awesome. Thank you personally for all of your support of Negative Progression, and the bands that I've been releasing over the last couple of years. And of course, Chris is a great friend, someone who I have been so fortunate to have met through the last couple of years of running the label, and he's in Fire Sale, an awesome band on Negative Progression. And yeah, our relationship has really blossomed, and I wanted to bring him onto the team that I intend to continue to grow. And yeah, it's all family with Negative Progression. So
yeah, it's really cool that you rely on somebody that you've worked with over the past couple of years, and you're not just hiring somebody that maybe worked for another record label or you needed some help. It's like, like you said, it is family. You need somebody there that's going to be willing to go that extra mile or do whatever needs to be done for the label, right?
yeah, oh, absolutely. I mean, I started Negative Progression back in 1996, and I ran the label myself the whole time. But over the years, I've had different folks, it being interns and volunteering to do various things. And I consistently put out records through 2014. And I took a break and focused on my legal career. I'm actually a lawyer, and started doing that a lot more between 2015 and about basically the pandemic 2020, and decided around the pandemic time to start up again and put out some 7-inches, and things started going in the right direction, and a lot of people were very excited about the new bands that I've signed. So it's good.
Yeah, it's that old motto, and I think Chris and I talked about this on the podcast. It's like either get busy living or get busy dying, right? It's like the pandemic came out. It's like, all right, what do I love? What do I want to do? What do I want to concentrate my efforts on, even if I'm not going to get paid to do it? Like, what do I love? I have these things. I got to pay the bills and do all that kind of stuff. But what can you turn to? In 1996, when you started it, how old were you when you started the record label?
I was in college. Yeah, I was in college.
Yeah.
So I'm 48. So in 1996, I was just starting into my junior year of college. My first release was actually, my first couple of releases was a pop punk band I was in college called Litmonger, and we were sort of like a mix, I would say, between early Weston and early Blink. So we had that kind of like silly, goofy pop punk vibe, not really a professional trying to be, super mainstream sounding. And all of us were, at the time, straight edge, and we were super into like the hardcore scene, but we were playing silly pop punk. So it was a fun dynamic because we were playing with other pop punk bands and hardcore bands. And back then, I don't know if you recall, but pop punk was really like Ramones style. That was really popular, like the Lookout bands and the Queers and Screeching Weasel. And obviously ska was really big on the East Coast. We didn't play ska, but my band was, I lived in Boston, and the band was based in Hartford, Connecticut, but we did tour. But then on the West Coast, there was all that Epitaph Fat style SoCal pop punk.
Yeah, and I noticed I was reading your bios. I was doing some research to find some of the bands that I didn't know that are currently on your label or were on your label past, and you do a really good job on your website, kind of doing the chronological of all the stuff that you've put out since '96. And in some of the bios, you said that one of your bands had opened up, your band 30 BC opened for Sensfield.
Yeah.
So I'm a big, huge Sensfield fan. So tell me about that and how that gig come about.
That was actually the first show I ever played in a band. So that was, so 30 BC was just a project that I started with one of my good friends when I was a freshman in college, and he was a senior in high school. And I see you're wearing a Falcons hat. It was in Atlanta. My first 2 years of college, I went to Emory before I transferred up to Boston. Nice. So yeah, we were just getting into punk rock together. We would buy issues of Maximum Rock and Roll, look at the ads for Fat Records and Epitaph, we would go to Tower Records, and every week or two, each one of us would buy a punk rock CD, and we would listen to them together, whether it was, Pennywise or Green Day or Op Ivy or NoFX or, Minor Threat or whatever. And we were slowly learning more about punk, and we both played instruments and we wrote some songs, and actually 30 BC, our demo was the very first thing that I pressed. So I pressed that and the first Lipmonger demo, which was the second Negative Progression release. Both of those were on vinyl, and 30 BC really only played 2 shows. One was High School Battle of the Bands, and another one was opening for Sensefield.
Wow, that's those are stark in contrast between 2 different gigs. That's pretty awesome, though.
Yeah.
I mean, not everybody could say they opened for Sensefield, but then you're like, oh man, you must have toured with so many other bands. Like, no, we did the high school thing. That's awesome.
After that, the band I was in, Lipmonger, we did tour a lot over the course of between 96 and the end of 97. And I left the band after that, and they continued on for a year or two after that. But I've toured a lot with the other bands on Negative Progression, and various times I've booked shows and tours. When I lived in Boston, I booked shows all around New England. When I lived in Northern California, I booked shows all around California. For a period of time, I ran a booking agency called Hit the Road Booking, where I not only booked the bands on Negative Progression, but I also booked other bands that were not on Negative Progression. So I've done a lot in the punk rock world as far as touring goes.
Yeah, and that's I mean, and now being a lawyer too, you have that aspect of handling the legal things as far as a label and all that kind of stuff. I don't know if your specialty in legal is music industry, but I mean, just having that legal background is incredible to have as well, and having that history now with everything since '96, and you said you stopped at 2014, and then you come back in after the pandemic. What had changed in that landscape to where when you were a kid and putting out these labels and all that kind of stuff, and how it is now? Is it a whole new world and putting out music, or is it kind of like just getting on the bike and riding it again?
Well, it's kind of funny, because one of the reasons why I stopped altogether back and my last releases in that period were in 2014. So I effectively stopped at the end of 2014, 2015. And it really had to do with digital. And, it was difficult enough when iTunes came out and downloads started. And then we had to deal with Napster and LimeWire and all that stuff. I mean, it's great for music listeners, but it's really not good for people who invest thousands and thousands of dollars in trying to help promote the bands that they love, like I did. And then as soon as Spotify hit, it was over. I mean, streaming, I just didn't see any reason why people would pay money for music when it was free. And in fact, over the years, I didn't want to put my releases on Spotify. They were still on iTunes, but I was hesitant to do that because I wanted to try to recoup some of the losses. I mean, most people that run punk rock labels do it out of their own pocket, and Negative Progression is not Equal Vision or Epitaph or Hopeless, and so I was just trying to attempt to lose less. And so
Sure.
But obviously a lot of the bands that I worked with over the years really wanted people to hear their stuff on Spotify. And so eventually, after some encouragement and cajoling by some of my friends that I put out records for, I ended up doing it. But over the time when I wasn't putting out music, I really never ever thought I would do it again. I would go to shows and I would see bands that I liked, and I was interested in maybe putting out music for them, but it was just financially, it really didn't seem smart. And, I didn't want to repeat the past mistakes, even though I love music and I love helping bands. And I think marketing is one of my strengths. I majored in advertising in undergrad. So, and I used to say, if you can, I mean, you have to be able to like sell ice to an Eskimo, you know what I mean? To be able to survive in this era. But I did notice that more and more bands were putting out vinyl and selling vinyl, and vinyl was coming back. And one thing that I noticed with the people that were listening to punk rock and hardcore and indie and stuff in the last few years is that I think that there was just sort of like an overload of digital, maybe over a period of time, maybe 10 years. And a lot of younger people and people our age want to go back to some semblance of balance with analog and have the experience of putting record on a turntable, or even like having the CD booklet in their car, or listening to cassette tape collection. I mean, it's really not just, and Chris knows this, and I don't want to dominate the conversation, but I really can't stand when people talk about music, especially underground music, as content, because it's art. And to really appreciate art, you have to stop and enjoy it.
Absolutely. And, and tapes are coming back and everything. And, the vinyl's coming back. I mean, every format's coming back. I mean, it seems like it gives hope for smaller labels or labels like yours, an opportunity to make a little bit more money than you had to in the past, especially with the invention of Spotify and all that good stuff. But Chris, go ahead. You want to say something?
I was just going to say, like, everything he's saying is completely correct. The new stuff that we have coming out on February 7th, which is not an NPR release. It's actually a self-release thing. There are a couple older songs we wanted to get out just because they're living on a hard drive. And, it's just something we wanted to put out into the world. And one of the songs, at the end of the song, there's kind of like this 20 to 30 second instrumental piano thing with a sample over it. And we had this discussion in the band of like, should we cut that? Is it too long? Are people not going to dig it? And we came to the consensus is that if people want to turn it off by that point, the song's over, that's fine. But when I wrote the song and when we put all our parts on and we were trying to, make it as cool as it could be and get artistic with it, I threw that on there because I thought it was kind of cinematic, and we wrote it before we really knew what the band was going to be. And I was just I wasn't coming from the standpoint of an algorithm or people's attention spans. I was coming at it from, I think this is really fucking cool. And so we came to the decision to go ahead and leave it on there. If people don't like it, they can skip to the next song. It doesn't matter. But, we do in this band, and I think Seth has become a big major player in that, as kind of like the sixth member of the band. I'll send him a song and he'll be like, "That's really long, man." Or I'll send him a song. Right. And he's like, "Oh, well, maybe it needs to be a little catchier in this place." And I love that. Right. And that's where we're not really worried about appeasing the fans or appeasing the listeners, but we do want to make the songs the best that they can be. This song in particular just had like a thing at the end that I put on there because I thought it was cool. And since it's not like a single that we're going to push insanely hard, I didn't really see the point of taking it off. So artistically, we left it on there. And I love the fact that Seth and I talk about this all the time. It's not content, it's art. It's what you're putting out into the world, what you're creating. Yeah, you can edit it and you can make it palatable for the masses, but don't change all of your ideas to make it that way. You know what I mean?
No, absolutely. And I think it's smart that you kind of do it now because you've been putting out music since 2021, right? So it's not like your first single coming out and it's kind of like, what the hell is this? Like, what kind of band is this? You know what I mean? People know
if they like Fire Sale, they're going to be able to spend an extra 20 seconds listening to a piano part
and be like, I haven't heard this from Fire Sale before. You know what I mean? You're kind of like flipping the script. You know what I mean?
It's different. Like, okay, it is way different than what we've put out previously. It's one of the oldest songs. We didn't know what we were doing back then. Really?
Well, so every band or many of the bands on Negative Progression over the last couple of years, I have put out some songs by those bands, but it's not like some kind of exclusive thing where each one of them have self-released songs digitally as well, whether it's Gone Stereo, Time Spent Driving, The Last Second Save. Each one of those groups have released some songs on their own, and that's fine by me. I tend to just like listen to the songs, and the ones that really connect with me are the ones that I want to release. And it also depends on the timing and what other records I'm putting out at the time. This is, like I said, this is a hobby for me, a love project. But I'm actually not an entertainment lawyer. I used to have a small entertainment practice many years ago, but I'm actually a criminal law attorney. So I run a small law practice that, I do criminal law. So when people get accused of crimes, I defend them from those.
So you're my guy. If I get in trouble, I can call you up because you're right down
Yeah,
the street.
of course.
Oh, hell yeah.
Have
my back.
Have you passed the bar in Indiana? If I get in trouble, can I call you too?
Not in Indiana. I'm licensed in Florida and New York and Kentucky. And at one point I was licensed in New Jersey. I withdrew from New Jersey, but nope, not Indiana.
Damn it. I'll get in trouble in Kentucky then.
Don't get in trouble. Don't get in trouble.
I've never been in trouble. I've never been in trouble my entire life, so we're good to go.
Yeah.
But it's nice to know if I got caught shoplifting when I was 15 at Bird Irons at the Altamont Mall.
Yeah.
And they took me to a holding cell, and I was in there for like an hour, and an undercover cop busted me. I was stealing some kind of like medallion necklace, like Maui and Sons, like dog tag kind of a thing. And so my mom dropped me off because I was meeting friends, whatever. I get arrested. I go to a holding cell for like an hour, and then my dad comes picks me up, and I remember the cop on the phone saying, "Oh, we got your son here with a case of sticky fingers. You need to come pick him up." So my dad comes and picks me up, and my dad is like mad cool. He's like, he's the coolest guy in the world. But if you park your car on the opposite side of the driveway, he rips you a new asshole. That's the type of dad my dad was. But my mom, I got home, and my mom she was screaming and running in and out of the house and beating the living shit out of me for doing it. And I never stole again. I never committed another crime. Just because I feared the wrath of my mom. But should I ever get into the trouble again and get a case of the sticky fingers, I'm calling you to help bail me out.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Cool. All right. So with the label, it's so funny. With you, Chris, and I was reading your bio, and there was something about the bio that I really loved. I love the quote, your favorite quote by Henry Rollins. It's knowledge without mileage equals bullshit. And I think that I know what that means to me, but what does that mean to you in that sense?
I mean, to me, it's almost like words to live by, almost like a motto, because I have never been, I've never bought a mansion. I've never been on MTV Cribs or anything, but I've been in bands that have had some success. And, I've been on tour buses, and I've had catering, and I've played huge places, and it never became like some windfall of success. It was just a job. It was what I always wanted in my life. It was to use my guitar to feed myself and pay my bills. That's what I wanted. And most of my adult life, I had a situation in different bands that was the case. But there's also many, many times in my life where you play to 4 people and you sleep on someone's floor and you eat ramen noodles at a truck stop with coffee water. And if I hadn't done that, you can really change who you are and get kind of a bigger head if you have any type of success. And I met people while I was in a successful band that had never slept on floors and had never had 15 people in a van because you didn't want to, pay for a bus because you wanted to save money. And those people fade out pretty quickly, and they're not the people that I want to surround myself with. So it's like, you can have the knowledge, you can write great songs, you can be in a band that's playing an arena, but if you never slept on somebody's fucking floor, you never put the time in, the mileage in that you need to do, it's bullshit. That's just how I feel. And then in other ways, this is the way that I say it's funny. You got 18-year-old kids that on their 18th birthday, they go to the tattoo shop with their sleeve all figured out and they spend $5,000 and they get their sleeve and it's perfect and it looks like somebody, it looks like something someone drew in a book. It doesn't even look like a real tattoo. And then you got me that has stuff that maybe is questionable, but it's a yearbook.
I have
Like,
those too. Yeah.
There, you see a bad tattoo on yourself and you're like, oh, I remember when I got that stupid tattoo. And I think that's the thing too, the mileage aspect of it. Being an 18-year-old kid and like me working at a record store and going next door to the tattoo shop and not having any money and going, hey, you guys need a TV? I've got a little TV. I'll trade you for a tattoo. And the guy's like, yeah. And then the tattoo's horrible. But it's not like, oh, I just got back from a tattoo artist and I have double sleeves and I look like a model, which is fine. Kids do that. It's great. But there's a mileage aspect that I have in my life. And maybe I sound like the guy saying in my day, but I just feel like you got to suffer for your art.
Yeah.
And it
absolutely.
makes your art better. So yeah, that's what it means to me, I guess. Long-winded.
You gotta put your time in, right? No matter what it is. And that comes with experience. And, it's just one of those things. And it is, when I read that, I was like, man, I get it. You have to make those mistakes. You have to learn the highs and lows. Because those guys are in those bands have never failed before and never had not, slept on anybody's floor. Like, imagine when they fail and they become nobody. They don't know how to adjust, right? They're too high to go back to the road or whatnot, or having to scrape by and start over again. You know what I mean? If you run those miles and you're up and down, it just makes you a more well-rounded person.
I'll never like mention any names, but there were a few festivals and a few like bigger sort of shows that were pretty massive where there were certain bands we were playing with that were bitching about catering. It's like, dude, you get to do this.
Right.
Like this is like a dream for people. Don't take it for granted. And it always just kind of rubbed me the wrong way,
Well, I think one thing that's changed a lot is I think it's really cyclical, because I've been seeing more and more and more. I feel like more and more the scene now is kind of like it was in the 90s and how I would imagine it was in the 80s, because back when I was a little guy just getting into punk rock, there weren't really that many bands. The internet was new, so most bands didn't have web pages. You couldn't email a band. You couldn't listen to a band online. The 90s, finding out about punk rock was very much, I would imagine, like it was in the 80s. And bands, they would put out a record. They would maybe like tour the US once for the record. And then that was it. And then the next year they wrote another record, like, Bad Religion or No Effects or someone. And then we have like the 2000s to kind of like 2020-ish, where especially in the 2000 to 2015 or so, you have bands who think that they have to tour like 9 months out of the year in order to get this level of success, mainstream success. And I think what's happened over the last like 10 years or so is that there's so many other forms of entertainment that are taking people's attention, whether it's, gaming or whatever it is, Netflix, so many more people stream movies and TV all the time, that I think that now it's kind of like you have to figure out a way to promote your band differently to cut through all of that distraction. And so like what a lot of the bands on Negative Progression, they, don't really tour, don't play too many shows. There is a direct correlation to selling more records and playing more shows. That's just the way it is. However, most of the bands on my label anyways are in their 30s, 40s, and 50s, have full-time jobs, have kids, have family, and I have no interest in pressuring someone to go on tour, because in the past, a lot of my releases, I put them out, and because there was that pressure to tour, there was so much pressure that the band broke up. And so I don't, it would be better to have a band release a 7-inch every 9 months and play, a dozen shows a year and just stay a band for 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years than to like put all this pressure on themselves, tour everywhere they can over the course of like 2 or 3 years to try to get big, whatever that means, and then just break up.
Yeah, it just seems you're right. I mean, you can put out those 7 inches and put out and people, and people will still listen to it. And if people like it enough and they're playing in your city, you'll go out and check them out. And a lot of these bands that I do interview on this podcast, they're the same way. They're older. They all have daytime jobs, and they're like, hey, we're going to go out for maybe a couple weeks, come back in, and then go out for a month later. We're going to go out for a couple more weeks, but we're going to hit a couple more towns here and there, and all that kind of stuff. There seems to be that trend now more than there is those road dogs that start and go out for 9 months at a time. I don't know how people can do it with the price of gas and all that kind of stuff. And I just I have a hard time understanding how bands don't end up underwater after a 6-month tour or what.
They are underwater. I mean, the thing is, it's like streaming. You get like about something like a half a penny per stream, maybe even less, maybe a quarter of a penny. So you have to get millions and millions and millions of streams in order to get any decent money. And obviously it's not like suddenly promoters are paying bands more at shows than they used to. They're paying the same, maybe a little bit more, but it's still selling. It's still a steady growth, getting more and more people over the course of time to check out your band through consistently playing shows when you can in places where you've played before. I've always said, I want, like, as a band, you have to turn people who just see your band and like your band into people who are obsessed with your band, because that's the only way that people will get to the point where they will spend money on your band. Because I mean, like, how many shows have we been to, in our younger years, where you see a 4-band package tour and maybe you like the first band, but you never heard of them before. Like, I saw Sum 41 open a face-to-face tour or something like, a million years ago. They just broke up, RIP. But, you're going to spend the money on the merch for the headliner and maybe the direct support, but the opener needs it almost more. And so that opener, you have to see that opener like 3, 4, 5 times before they're your draw. You want to go to see them. You want to spend your dollars on their records and their merch.
And I'll go ahead, Chris.
No, I'll just say, and in fire sales situation, bands I've been in the past that had a fairly large following, I never really paid attention to the merch. It wasn't my forte, right? And we do really well at Warped Tour or wherever we were at. In fire sale, it's been like, I'm pretty much the one that's going to do it, right? So I have to figure out and keep track of it. And we don't play a lot of shows. I think last year we played 5, maybe something like that, 6 maybe. And every time we play a show, we do really well in the merch category, selling records, selling shirts. And, when we put things up online, it's not anything next to like another huge, like a huge band, but we do fairly well. I think that if it's kind of a double-edged sword, if you tour all the time and you get to a headlining spot and people are obsessed with your band, you can sell a lot and you can really keep your band afloat. But then if you're kind of not playing very often, but you're releasing really cool stuff, it's slower. But like, we have people that every time we put something out, it's not a lot of people, but every time we do, they're first in line to put in their credit card and grab it, Yeah, like you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, shout out to Road Dog Supply. I told my buddy over there that I would give him a shout out. So shout out to Road Dog Supply for I finally got the hoodie when it was a month and a half of coldness, Seth, here in Florida. And then of course I get the hoodie and it's 80 degrees today.
It was 60. Christ. It was 60 today in Indiana, man. It's crazy.
Brad, I don't think you can ever have any justification for complaining about the weather in Orlando, Florida.
Yeah. It was negative 25 here last week. So yeah, shut up.
No, hell no. No, I have two sweatshirts. I have a quicksand sweatshirt and I lost my my With Honor sweatshirt that I bought last year. I lost it somewhere in my house. I'm like, I need a new one. And then I saw yours online. I'm like, hell yeah, I'm jumping on it. So I got the hoodie or whatever. And I'm talking to him. I'm like, yeah, it's so cold here. I'm like, I need to update this because my last sweat, I have 3 hoodies and that's it. Like, and a big winter coat that I wear into Atlanta when I go to Atlanta. But other than that, as a Floridian, you don't have very many like warm clothes.
Well,
So,
dude, I'll tell
yeah.
we were talking about the obsession thing. I set an alarm on my phone so I could get pre-sale of this new face-to-face hoodie. They only release like 500 or something in different sizes. And I was so worried because last time they released a shirt, I didn't get it and I got it. And this is now my new hoodie that I wear all the time. So I'm and I love face-to-face, even though I'm in a band with Mr. Riddle. I still, I hound him all the time about like stories and shit.
Well, speaking of Matt Riddle, I messaged him last weekend, I think, and I was like, "Hey, man, can you cut a promo for a podcast? Because I'm interviewing Seth and for the podcast." He's like, "Yeah, absolutely. I haven't heard from him. So if you see him,
you might want to hit him up again. He's got that thing
I
that
don't
I
want
have.
to bother him.
No, I have the same thing he has. Like I say yes to stuff, and then my brain just goes bye, and
No, it's all good. It's all good. But he responded and he was very nice about it and all that good stuff. But yeah, no, I wanted a sweatshirt to wear. There's a Sanford Punk Fest this weekend in Sanford. A lot of Wes Hoffman's playing and Dial Drive and all that. A lot of really killer bands like 20-something bands or whatever. And I'm like, oh, it's gonna be cold. I need to wear my hoodie. And I checked the weather today. It's like the high is 83 and like the low is 62. And I'm like, well, it's the low is 62. Is it gonna be 62 at night? So like it's gonna be 83 degrees, and I gotta haul around this like hoodie all day and not be able to wear it. Like I have no idea. I'm so confused living in Florida and cold. I have no idea how to adjust. But
yeah, you just have to wear like
it's not negative 52, but
yeah, you just have to wear a flannel.
Yeah.
I'll have to get one before Saturday for sure. All right, so let's talk about the label as far as current status and some new records that you're putting out. But before we do that, like what do you look for in a band when signing, or how do you discover bands that you're interested in putting out? And Chris, what would you bring to the A&R side with bringing in new talent, bringing in new bands with the label, and what the goal is with Negative Progression?
Well, so far I've brought my digital Rolodex.
Yeah. Okay. If people know, well, you young people, there's
I think one of the things that was kind of cool, and I think Seth, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I've had a really good experience, and we've had a really good experience working with Seth. I've worked with many labels over the course of my life, and it does feel like a family vibe. And like, I know regardless of what we need, even if it's something crazy, it might not happen, but Seth will at least take the call. You know what I mean? Like we'll at least try to make it work or try to figure it out. And there's so many labels out there with way more resources that are not like that. And so I've had a really good experience working with the label, and the label, Seth and the label has done so many great things for Fire Sale that some of these, deals, some of these little meetings we've had where I've been privy to it, and I've been kind of a part of the wooing or whatever you want to call it, is I've been able to tell maybe some of these people that are on the fence about my experience with Seth and with the label. And I think that's kind of put it over the top a couple times. And I think that's what I bring. I mean, of course, if I see a band I love and I bring it to Seth and he's like, I'm not really feeling it, it's his label. I mean, I'm just,
right, sure.
I'm just here to help. And I love being a part of it and being able to do that kind of work. But I think my stuff that I bring to the table is some communication, some testimonial, some putting the new people at ease, letting them know what they're getting into, and letting them know from someone that is actually in a band on the label what their experience, what they can actually kind of expect from their experience.
It was another mile back to your house, the place it went wrong, the summer heat, bare feet, fresh cut lawns, and in your mind I
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, credibility, I mean, Chris keeps saying bands. Chris was in the Ataris. And that was one of my favorite bands.
I was the fifth guitarist, so it's not, Dave Grohl was the fifth drummer of Nirvana. I tell people that too.
Yeah.
But
You
as
still
far
have it
as
on your resume, buddy.
yeah, no, I mean, there's a lot of Chris has had experiences that other bands have only dreamed of, and what I look for in bands is what I've always looked for in bands. I have a very wide interest in different forms of punk rock music. I have always been a hardcore kid. I love hardcore. I love metal, but I also love pop punk, and I love techie indie stuff. So, there's kind of like a range, but for me, always it's been, I would say I really look for bands that write music that sticks in your head, regardless of the genre. And that's not saying that every band has to have a catchy chorus. Like the part that sticks in your head could be, and usually is, a chorus. And obviously great vocals are super, super important to me. I always like vocals really mixed far out in front, because back in the day, it was always like guitar and vocals were kind of mixed almost around the same level. And I always felt the guitars were typically challenging the vocals. And I want to know what the vocals are, and I want to sing along. But a lot of times I was guessing. But, I think that, guitar parts can be memorable. I mean, there are plenty of songs that we all love that have like an opening guitar riff, or, in Fire Sale, an opening bass riff because of Riddle, it just sticks in your head, and like you're walking down the street and you're just singing it to yourself. And that's always been really, really important to me. And bands have at various times sent me music, and it sounds great, but it doesn't sound special to me. And I always try to find bands that, really try to make something special and different, really try to not just do a cookie cutter. There have always been complaints over the years about certain other labels where a lot of their bands sound the same, back in the 90s, certain people complained about the Fat Wreck sound, like every band sounds the same. I mean, I loved most of those bands, so it was okay with me.
It was okay with me too.
But also like even like the Rise Records, metalcore, screamo stuff from the 2000, later 2000, early 2010, like there are just certain, I mean, it's important for a label to have a sound, and that's okay. But I really think that plenty of bands want me to put out their record, and I'm honored that bands would want me to have my logo on their music. But it's sort of a combination of a lot of factors. And especially now, I want to work with bands. My goal is to help a band do what the band wants to do, right? Whereas in the past, I was approaching bands with the perspective of, well, I've released dozens of records. I've been doing this forever. You should listen to me. And I don't want to do that anymore. I want to ask the bands, and that's what I'm doing now, what works for you and what can I help you do that you want to do, and let's talk about it. Every band that I work with now needs different things because the band members want different things out of their band based on their life situation. Like the Last Second Save, for example, is mostly just one singer-songwriter who has other folks that play with him live, but it's really kind of like a dashboard confessional kind of a thing. And so Jesse, the singer-songwriter for Last Second Save, he has different obligations than a band with like Fire Sale or Gone Stereo that has multiple members, or even like Time Spent Driving, they have multiple members, but the brain master of that band has always been the singer-songwriter John. So every band wants different things, and I don't want the bands to feel like I'm pushing them into something. I do want to help the bands grow, and I have a lot of experience, and I have had experiences that have gone well and have not gone well. So, I mean, Chris alluded to this, but I'm trying to take more of a producer role with my bands. I'm not saying that I'm the producer of the records I put out, but I really, really want, and I'm trying to have more of a little bit of a contribution in the creation and organization of the songs. So I didn't used to do that because I was so paranoid. Back in the 90s, everyone was so on edge about like bands selling out and record labels like changing the way a band sounds and stuff.
Yeah.
And I just didn't want to do that at all. So I was almost hands off to a negative and not a positive, because I have released a couple of records that I feel like if I had previously had a voice in either like how the song order, or maybe if I had listened to demos before they went in to record the actual record, I could have said, you know what, this is a full length, there's going to be 10 songs. You should have 13 or 14 songs written, and let's pick the best 10.
Yeah.
Instead of you wrote 10 songs and maybe like 6 of them are awesome, 2 of them are pretty good, and 2 of them aren't great. Like by that time, you're already recording. It's already coming out.
Yeah. That's interesting. That's a really good take. Now, I guess one of my last questions about the label itself is would you be open to bands from like Europe or Australia or any of that kind of stuff? Or what, just basically distribution, like putting out the records here in the States kind of a deal. I've seen a lot of labels team up with, like P Records, with Fire Sale and all that kind of stuff. But could you be like the P Records of the US for Australia and all that kind of stuff? Is there goals there, or are you currently doing that now?
Well, I mean, that specific example, Pete from P is exclusively distributing Negative Progression in Asia at this point. And I'm looking for distributors specifically in Japan and Europe, but I do have a great distributor in England, and people in Europe can buy my stuff through Devil Dog.
Nice.
But I would love to sign bands from Canada, Australia, Europe, England, pretty much anywhere that has a strong punk or hardcore or indie rock scene, but or emo scene. But I'm not sure exactly how I want to go about doing it, because I think back to bands like Millencolin or Satanic Surfers or High Standard, bands from other countries that were released on American labels. And I believe that those American labels released them in worldwide. So I'm trying to figure out, would it be best, since I'm just releasing, like a 7-inch or maybe even an EP or whatever it is, like, would it be better for me to like partner on a release similar to how a lot of great labels like Double Helix and Thousand Island and P are doing, and all sorts of great labels. They're working together to sort of release one record in all these areas and get the local promotion behind it. I'm thinking whether that's a good idea or whether I would just sign a band from Canada, and obviously they would sell more records in Canada. And if those labels did distribution, if they wanted to distribute it, I would just sell more records in Canada. Or obviously if I signed a band from Australia, it would be distributed through P, and P Records would sell more of them. So I'm trying to decide. It's, a lot of how I approach the label with my advertising and marketing background. A lot of it was like thinking about branding. There's certain labels out there that like all those labels, whether it was Victory or Epitaph, they had a sound before they diversified their sounds. But I always tried to have a sound, which is why historically I never released heavy music. I historically didn't release any heavy music until like the late 2000s. And that was because every other label started diversifying their sound. So I figured I have always loved hardcore and metal, so I'm going to do that too. But yeah, I would love to help every band that I work with get their music out there in the world and help them build and have great experiences. And when bands on my label release stuff in other countries, I want to go on tour with them there, because I have not toured internationally myself. So I would love to do that. But part of that is just generally building the label. So in addition to what I would hope to do, any of the listeners, viewers out there, I would like to take on a couple other people, ideally, to volunteer and help with the label. I think I'm going to try to get somebody to help with calling brick and mortar record stores and trying to encourage them to order our records and bring them in, because I have really good physical distribution through the Orchard. Used to be called Red, Sony owned company. And, someone that when my bands do play shows, another person maybe that helps with promotion. So maybe at some point I'll start doing posters again, sending out posters, trying to maybe even like do a print ad in the alternative weekly in that town. If, like Fire Sale has played a couple shows in Texas. So if we have something planned and they're only playing 3 or 4 shows and it makes sense, maybe doing a print ad in the alternative weekly right before the shows. I don't know. I'm open to any ideas. And I'm getting into music publishing as well. So I'm trying to also pitch. My plan is to try to pitch my releases to be placed in TV, film, sports, video games, all that stuff. And I've had a little success over the years in that, but I really want to put a lot of energy into trying to help my bands appear in those ways, because it doesn't just get them out there. It does create a lot of, you get paid for it.
7:30 and the clock keeps ticking by. I remember how it felt that night. It takes me back to a place and time when I couldn't get you off my mind. But now hey, can you hear me? 'Cause I'm singing in your radio. Yeah, now I told you lately that I no longer feel lost without you.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. So let's talk about the releases. Let's talk about what's coming up for Negative Progression. So let's talk about you had mentioned the Last Second Save. He's got a new record coming out, and what can we expect from the Last Second Save?
Well, actually, the vinyl of the Last Second Save's second 7-inch on Negative Progression came out. It's in our web store. You should buy it. It's got a bundle with a T-shirt, and there's also a bundle with both 7 inches and a tote bag. So it's pretty fun. But yeah, so what I've been doing up until this point is kind of staggering the releases. So what I've done is release digitally first to kind of create a buzz, let people kind of fall in love with the songs. And then hopefully they, when the record comes out, they'll buy the record. And it's all part of this idea of trying to promote a release over the course of a long period of time, 8 or 9 or 10 months. Because like I said, people have so many split attention spans. So figure it'll take time. And these are all new bands. I love releasing new bands. That being said, if any pre-existing awesome huge bands want to release something on Negative Progression, please call me. But
I was just getting ready to speak to you about that. About Fire Sale split. I want to talk about that as well before I forget.
Yeah. Well, I'll talk about that in 2 seconds. But yeah, basically, the Last Second Save is based in Baltimore. That band plays pretty regularly in the Maryland and Virginia area. And I think that Jesse, the singer, is originally from Jersey. So I think they're going to start playing some more shows in like Philly, Jersey, that whole area. And it's just that's a slow growth band. I think the lyrics are awesome. it's a little bit more like a Dashboard Confessional or Something Corporate or Jack's Mannequin, indie emo kind of band. But I just, those songs are earworms. Like the choruses are great.
Yeah.
And so, but then after that, well, we'll talk about Fire Sale and Pulley. So fortunately, thanks to Chris and his friendship with Pulley,
my digital Rolodex again.
Yeah, we're going to be releasing well, I guess I should say Pulley and Fire Sale. No offense.
No offense taken.
But yeah, so we're releasing a Pulley and Fire Sale split 7-inch. And
awesome.
It's going to have 2 songs from each band, 2 new songs. Both songs are going to be mixed at the blasting room and mastered at the blasting room.
Awesome.
And Mark DeSalvo is doing the art, just like he's done the other Fire Sale art. Mark has done amazing artwork for so many bands.
Pulley albums too, hasn't he?
A lot of Pulley albums.
The majority of the Pulley stuff. Yeah.
So it's going to be great. And I have loved talking to Scott in Pulley a number of times, and I hope that everyone loves the record, and maybe I'll release more for Pulley down the road. I certainly hope and plan on releasing more for Fire Sale.
Yeah, that's that. When I saw that split, I'm like, oh, this is huge. I mean, this is good for Fire Sale. It's good for the label. It's good for and Pulley is like one of those bands. They were kind of like, I loved them in the 90s, but I didn't like the Steam Driven Engine was like one of my favorite records back in the 90s. But their last couple records, The Golden Life and No Change in Weather, are like those albums are just absolutely incredible to me. And I was like, man, did I sleep on this band in the 90s? Because I know they've released so many other records before this, and I felt like I slept on this band. And the last 2 records are just incredible. And seeing them do a split with you, Chris, and Fire Sale, and on your label, Seth, I think it's gonna be huge, man. That's awesome. That's great news.
I slept on him too, like when they kind of started putting out stuff away from Epitaph, because like I loved all the Epitaph releases. Then I kind of, because Scott and I have known each other for a while, and I know some of the other guys in the band, but I guess I never really, I don't know, I was listening to other stuff, but then like Scott and I got close because he was on my podcast like 4 or 5 years ago. He's been on the podcast like 4 times now. And I went back and listened to all the stuff post Epitaph. And I'm like, how does a band get better in their like 4th chapter of their career? Like it's really, it's quite remarkable when you listen to those last couple records. Like so, I mean, not only did I love them already, but just knowing that they continually put out such good music, and now we get to be on a release with them. It's kind of mind blowing a little bit.
Well, my thought about it too is like, I really think that NoFX breaking up kind of changes the landscape for pop punk and melodic punk like so dramatically. And other bands are getting older and maybe not playing as much. And I think obviously, the dudes in Pulley are no spring chickens either. And I'm saying this because I'm also, in 2 years, I'm going to be 50. So like, I'm not, it's not disparaging.
This year, buddy. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but my point is that I always used to have this conversation with bands, and Chris, I'm really curious to hear your perspective on this, because you've been in a bunch of bands at different levels. But I used to, one of my earliest releases, I put out a band called Over It, a number of records. And Over It is one of my favorite bands of all time. I loved putting out their records. They're great guys, incredible music. They released records on Lobster after Negative Progression, and then ended up on Capitol. And Over It was always opening for other bands. Always opening. And it's kind of like, always the bridesmaid, never the bride. And whenever I talk to band, and that's such an amazing opportunity for a band, right? If you're in the band, I could totally understand being like, okay, well, we can go out and open we can play direct support, or we can play second or whatever on this great tour. There's going to be a lot of people there. We're going to get paid money, but you're never like the main attraction. And you're always like, Over It's playing again with this other band that is my primary interest. And I think that that's important to do maybe half of the time, maybe 2/3 of the time, 1/3. I don't know what the division is, but I always think that it's really good for building a band if you are someone that your band can draw some people to go out and headline some tours, bring out up and coming bands, and that also like gets new and younger kids like into your band, and then like those bands are so excited that they got to open for you, and they're telling everyone it's the biggest thing that happened to them, and then you get this slow change where you suddenly become the big headliner over time. And that's and I honestly, shit, if things would be in a great world, I mean, somebody's got to become the next NoFX. Why not Pulley?
Yeah, someone's got to take that reign, right?
Yeah,
everybody's peeking for it right now, I would imagine.
Chris, what do you think about that?
I mean, just from some experience, I'll even tell you experience with the Ataris. Like the last time that I did Warped Tour with the Ataris was 2009. And so we were still on the main stage, but 2009 was like Thrice and Under Oath. And it was one of those first years where like different kinds of music was starting to get on the main stage. So it was like, if you went to Warped Tour in 2009 on the main stage, it was the Ataris, Bad Religion, NoFX, Less Than Jake, Thrice, Under Oath, and A Devil Wears Prada. And The Devil Wears Prada. So it was kind of a unique thing of where there was the old guard, there was the new guard. And I remember being at the merch table, and like we were on the main stage. So like people like the Ataris, people knew who we were. It was only 5 years removed from the big record. Like people knew the band. But I remember these kids coming up in Under Oath shirts and Thrice shirts and buying our stuff and getting pictures with us. And I was like, there's no way they came to see us.
Yeah.
But they saw us because they were about half of the days that we played the tour. I remember us and Under Oath were like neck and neck, and normally it was us right before them, and then sometimes it was them right before us. So if you were there to see Under Oath, you probably caught the end of our set, or you caught the beginning of our set as you were leaving. So it was really cool because we always went back to the merch table because, as you know, if you're in a band and you're trying to sell merch, it's a really good idea to go hang out at the merch table afterwards because people want to come take pictures and hang out, and there's the stuff for sale. So we did that every day, and it was about 50-50, like, oh yeah, you're an Ataris fan. And then, oh, you're young as shit and you have an Under Oath shirt on and you're buying our record or you're buying a shirt. So I totally agree with what you're saying, but I know that in Fire Sale, we've seen it both ways. We played a festival with 10,000 people and we did really, really well merch wise, and people liked the band and were singing the songs and everything. But then we headlined shows in the Southwest, and a couple of them were close to sellouts, but a couple of them had like maybe 40 people. Like, so you can always go out on your own. In some markets, you might do great. Some markets, you're going to eat shit. Or you can go play festivals with bigger bands or tour with bigger bands, and hopefully you're going to gain fans. But if you're not on your game on those opening slots, you can kiss it goodbye.
Well, also, if you're not on your game in the headlining slots to 40, I mean, I think maybe it's just because like my core is like, I'm, super DIY. That's how I view myself.
Yeah.
So, when you're playing to 20 people or 30 people or 40 people, if you're amazing, every one of those kids is going to remember that experience and tell 2 or 3 or 4 people.
Yeah.
And the next time you come, you might be playing to 100 or 150 people. Whereas if you play and you're not good, or if you show up and you have a rock star attitude and you don't really want to talk to people or stay by the merch, then you're not gonna win the fans. Or a lot of people, sometimes the band members, they'll just hang out with the other bands, or they'll hang out in the van and drink or whatever. And it's the same now as it always was, is that you have to, in punk rock and hardcore, you have to make a direct connection with the people that are listening to your music. And people know if you're faking it. People know if you started out as a really underground band, like Turnstile, for example, a band that I loved back in the day when they first started, amazing hardcore band, and their new stuff, a lot of people like it, but like, that's not Turnstile as far as I'm concerned. Like, I don't like it. And it is what it is, but there are other bands. That's just an example, but bands know if you're just like playing, giving it 50%, and then you're just like standing by the van drinking, ignoring everyone.
Well, no, and I'll tell you, perfect example. I live in a college town, Muncie, Indiana, Ball State University. We used to have this venue called Stevie Ray's House of Wax. It was a vinyl and CD shop that was above a Subway sandwich restaurant in this like loft. You had to take like 2 flights of stairs to get to it. And they had he had bands. Stevie had bands play there all the time. And when I was maybe a junior in high school, I went and saw At the Drive-In play there with maybe 15 people. And they treated it like they were playing Wembley Arena. Like it blew me away to the point they didn't even have records for sale. It was like their first time ever going on tour. This is before Relationship and Command, before any of that stuff. And I just remember that kind of changed my outlook on, these guys are from another state. They got here in a van. They have no money. No one came to see them, but they're acting like it's the last time they're ever going to play this music. And they're almost breaking themselves apart on stage with the way that they're playing. That changed my life, man. So like, I will tell you right now, with Fire Sale or any band I've ever been in, it might not always sound amazing, but you're going to remember it and you're going to see the passion. And I think sometimes that trumps perfection. But that's the thing. It's not about being perfect. It's not about how you say, it's about the experience and imprinting on those people, even if it's 10 people or even if it's just the bartender watching your band.
Yeah. I mean,
they're going to tell people.
Every Ramones song is only 3 chords. They were known for their energy and the speed and the vigor. I mean, when I lived in Boston in the 90s, I was a big fan of 10 Yard Fight, which was a youth crew hardcore band. And, there was so much action on the stage that, their bass player, people referred to him as the bass holder, like he hardly played. He would just, hold up. He would just hold the bass by the neck and like just chant for the crowd to sing along and like get like hyped. And that's a big part of what we do,
Yeah.
And that's huge. And I can smell bullshit from a mile and a half. After being in radio and dealing with the big giant bands, and I have stories beyond my with like bands like Korn and all that kind of stuff, and the egos, and sometimes they hide in the tour bus and all that kind of stuff, and they get to that level, and and they kind of lose sense of what got them there and all that kind of stuff. And I think if you're in a band and you're trying to sell merch and just meeting your fans, you can tell it's genuine, and give it your last shot, no matter if you're playing to 40 people or 400,000 people.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like it's your life. You've chosen this path. You know what I mean? Like do it like you were going to play in front of 40,000 people, but that word of mouth really helps out, because there's a lot of bands I've seen recently. I've gone out to shows a lot more as of recent, that some bands just like blow me away, and then some bands I'm like, this band is like horrible, even though they were really great and sounded great, but I'm like, I'm bored. I'm bored. Like there was like nothing there. They're just playing the hits or playing the songs. But then there's those bands that I'm like, well, I kind of like their record, but then you see them live. There's a band called Mercy Music. Like their music's great. I think it's fine. It's great. It didn't blow me away, but I saw them live, and I'm like, dude, this band's incredible. Like their stage presence, the bass player was like one of those bass holders. He flip around the bass, and the singer is just a showman beyond showmans. It's
shout out to
really
Brandon. Brandon's amazing.
Yeah.
Best dude ever
awesome.
too.
Yeah, and I got to meet him, and he was super nice, and we hung out, and we got a picture together. Really super nice guy. But they blew me away, and I'm like, all right, well now I'm a fan. So I went back and I listened to the record as after I saw the show. I'm like, I got to revisit this. Why didn't this hit me hooked first? You know what I mean? After seeing him live, you know what I mean? It was just one of those kind of experience. You have to experience the whole gamut of stuff, you know, of music and the performance together.
I mean, that's something that I sorry to cut you off, Chris.
No, you're good.
That I ideally like to look for in bands, and definitely used to look for in bands, especially you know, just that energy. You know, I mean, even if it was soft music, you know, I released a band called Counterfeit many years ago. That was an emo band. I released a band from Los Angeles called Down for the Count. That was like a pop punk band that leaned heavier on the pop side than it was sort of like Cartel or something like that. But like those bands, when they played live, they played like they were just like going 1,000,000% deep into their music. And I just love that. And to tie it in, like I am releasing also upcoming a 7-inch for a band from Sacramento called Younger. And those guys are so passionate about their music. They sound sort of like Seosin in the kind of like big sound. And they're really cool, and they've done a lot of self-release stuff, and their songs are going to be amazing. I've heard the demos, and the mixing is getting finalized now, and that's going to be a 7-inch that's going to be coming out in the next month or two, couple months. And you know, there's a lot of other bands that I'm talking to behind the scenes, that Chris is talking to, that I'm talking to, that we're trying to make stuff happen. I'm toying with some possible re-release of older records on vinyl, talking to some people about that kind of a thing. But I'm really focused on releasing new music, either by new bands or bands that are older bands that have reformed. If they want to, you know, I always want to hear what's new. Negative Progression is not a, you know, a vinyl archive, a history museum. You know what I mean?
Right. Sure,
it's all about being alive. And you know, it's okay if you, as a fan of punk rock, want to have your favorite records on vinyl. Like, that's totally fine. And as a label, if all you want to do is re-release, you know, older stuff on vinyl that it's been out of print for a while, that's fine. But Negative Progression has always been influenced by labels like Discord, Revelation, Lookout, underground labels that really just are trying to find something new. And people have been reaching out to me. Thank you so much for wanting to have me put out your bands, and keep sending new music my way and Chris's way.
Well,
You just send it to Seth. Don't send it to me.
Yeah.
all right, good note. Well, you know what, Seth and Chris, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me tonight. Always good catching up with you, Chris. And now, Seth, we got to go for that beer one of these days, and hang out and just shoot the shit, man. And you could tell me.
I'll see you at Warped Tour.
Get ready to sign. Oh yeah, we'll see. Yeah, we'll be at Warped Tour in November.
Yeah, because you guys won't be
Sorry,
watching
Chris.
any of the bands that are playing. Because you seen the lineup?
Well, I did see Pennywise. I've seen them.
I would go
times,
see
but
them.
also-
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean,
Dream,
I have
Census
tickets
Fail.
to the Orlando date. You know, I have tickets. My wife and I are going to go. I'm actually trying to get a booth on all 3 dates. I haven't yet figured out a way to secure a booth. I'm still reaching out to various contacts, and time is running out. But either way, I certainly have tickets for the Orlando date. And obviously, there's a lot of bands. There's like 7 or 8. There's going to be like 7 or 8 stages or something. I can understand they're trying to put a whole bunch of bands from a whole bunch of eras, and I'll probably be excited about some of them and won't be excited about a lot of the other ones.
I was just being a dick. There are some bands I understand, because I played Warped Tour I don't even know how many years it was, but in all the bands I played with, I've played every stage on that tour, from the Kevin Says stage up to the main stage, and every iteration of that tour, from the metalcore to the pop punk to the old school punk to the hardcore to whatever. And I was just kind of being a dick. I'm glad Kevin's doing it. I wish Fire Sale was playing, but it didn't happen. It's okay.
But next year, if you're nice, then maybe they'll put you on it.
Kevin, if you ever see this, I love you so much, man. Thanks for helping us.
I also love Kevin Lyman. Thank you for letting me run a stage in 2003. I ran the Radioactive stage and had a bunch of great bands on there.
He put my high school band on a month of the tour just because he was a nice guy. He didn't really, we weren't a good band. We were a horrible, well, we weren't horrible, but we probably shouldn't have been given a month on that tour. And because he is such an amazing person, he hooked us up. So yeah, there's some bands I don't care for on the tour, but overall, I'm so excited it's coming back. And I won't be going because I live in the butthole of America. But
what year was that? What year was that you were on Warped Tour in your high school band for a month?
2002, maybe. I was out of high school. That band lasted. We started it in high school.
Oh,
maybe 2001. I can't really remember. But yeah, I was on the tour with another band, Teching, and that's when I first met Matt Riddle. That was like 99, I think. And I met Tony and Rory and all the guys from No Use. And Rory taught me how to surf one day, and then he introduced me to Kevin Lyman, and I gave Kevin Lyman our little DIY CD of our stuff, and I emailed him, and he emailed me back, and yeah, here's a month on the tour. And I was like, what? I called my guys and like, oh my God, and we were freaking out. Shit. And then the day we got there in Kansas City, he came out and met us and took us to catering, and I was like it was like a movie. So yes, I will love Kevin Lyman until the day I die. He was on my podcast. We talk about all that stuff. If you guys want to check that out, I'll plug my podcast. That one time on tour
right now. Yeah. Where can people find you and listen to you do your speaking?
That one time on tour is a podcast that I did religiously for about 5 years. Then I took some time off. I have rekindled everything and got it going again. And now I'm doing a podcast in that same feed that's more based on records with my buddy Chris Daly from Authority Zero and Implants. And we just did one with Jake from Strung Out. We did one with Jim from Pennywise, Todd from Propaganda. But yeah, that one time on tour. You can also check out Fire Sale on all of the streaming platforms and at firesaleisaband.com. And or just go to negativeprogressionrecords.com because all the info's there too.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I'll provide links down below, and everybody can visit, the website and get the store and all that kind of stuff and the label.
But I love Warped Tour. I don't let anybody tell you I don't love Warped Tour.
No, I'm gonna make this a clip. I'm gonna find that one part where
I'm a dick, man. I need to not be such a dick now that I work for a record company.
Yeah.
That's the thing that's so funny. He's literally the least dickish person I've ever met.
Oh yeah.
I just saw a post about the lineup before we started talking, so it was fresh in my mind.
No, gotcha. I got you. But Seth, Chris, thank you so much. Like I said, I really do appreciate it. Seth, always a pleasure to meet you. Pleasure meeting you for the first time, and always a pleasure to meet you, Chris, and talk to you. And good luck with the split. I'm looking forward to it. Good luck with the other the bands and everything that you do over there at Negative Progression Records. Much appreciated, guys, for all your support of Signal Chords, and I'll support you guys the same. But thank you.
Get the last second save. Tell everybody to get that. It's awesome. I checked it out the other day. It's so good. I talked to them. What, Jesse's his name, right?
Jesse. Yeah, Jesse.
Such a good songwriter. Yeah. Everyone out there should buy their new record. It's amazing.
And I have to say, everyone should buy Fire Sales records because they're amazing.
Thanks.
And yeah, just check out the web store. We've got a lot of cool vinyl that has come out in the last couple of years. There's going to be more coming out, and I look forward to building the label, growing, building the bands, and thank you so much for Brad inviting Chris and I to be on your podcast. It's awesome. And, keep doing it. Keep doing what you're doing. And you really shine a light on smaller, growing, building underground bands. And while, every band deserves to be on a podcast, whether they're big or middle or small, smaller bands get fewer opportunities to be on podcasts. So that's really nice. And, thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm going to support. It's always been my thing is to support the. I think underdog is a bad term, but I love supporting bands that are starting off and bands that I think are really great that I know that have potential, and when they fully blossom and they become the biggest band in the world, I'm like, oh, you know what? I remember that band. But at the same time, I love finding new music. I love finding bands that no one's heard of and actually calling it my own and helping support those kind of bands and any band that wants to help promote via my podcast or anything. I'm very supportive of it, man. But it's been a fun time. It's been a fun ride, just like with you and Negative Progression Records and Chris with all your history with bands and now Negative Progression. It's a fun ride, man. We're all in it together and building the community. So much love to you guys. Many thanks for being on the podcast. We'll get you on back sooner than later. All right.
Cool.
Bye.
Peace out, man.
See you.
Thanks.